You need to spend more money on your marketing, and there's only two ways that you can spend anything when it comes to acquiring customers. You can spend your dollars or you can spend your time. And so in this video, I'm going to break down the $1 million math metrics that we use for you to understand exactly what you need to do to be able to scale acquisition and actually help you understand what it's going to take for you to 5 to 10x the amount of customers that you're acquiring in your business. It's going to be a banger of an episode. Can't wait. We're recording in my backyard for the first time. Let's jump into the episode. It's going to be super fun. Now, the first thing to understand about acquiring customers, and I don't think I've seen anybody talk about this online, is that there are two types of cost when it comes to actually acquiring customers. You can either acquire customers with dollars, or you can acquire customers with your secondary asset, which is time. And this is something that a lot of people don't actually know how to measure. You know, you'll hear all the time people say, okay, you need to be creating content, you need to be going and putting yourself out there. We get this all the time for our Media Firestorm clients inside of our programs. You know, we have people coming in who know they should be getting on podcasts. They know that they need more exposure. They know they need to be out on podcasts and out there online so people can find them, but they don't know the reasons why. And so in this episode, we're really going to help you guys understand not just how to measure the difference between earned media and paid for media, but what it's actually going to take for you to be able to scale and grow the company. If you're new to the channel, welcome. All we talk about is hitting 100K months. You know, whether you're getting to your first 100K or looking to smash on the next 100K into the business, this is going to be great fun for you. And just a quick earnings disclaimer, you know, we don't guarantee results. We don't talk about earnings that you guys can generate. We literally have no idea who you are and whether you're listening to this channel and if you're going to implement at all. And so everything here is really just for education purposes. You know, less than 3% of businesses even make it to $1 million a year, let alone 100K or multiple 100Ks on top. So with that little earnings disclaimer, let's just dive straight into the video and get into the content. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back to the channel. Glad to have you back here, and feel free to drop a like on the video if you think this is any good. So the first thing I want to talk about is these two different types of cost to acquire customers. And this is phenomenally important for you guys to be able to understand the exact dollar or time amount that it costs you either energetically or financially to be able to get new customers. And the reason this is important is for a giant freaking reason. So I went to a mastermind recently and we were talking through my funnel, my business, my processes, what we needed to do in order to scale. And one of the things that I noticed that I was doing is that I was focusing a lot on shit that was like not really all that important. I was looking at the business and I was saying, okay, well, I feel like sales isn't really where I want it to be. You know, our close rate at the time was at 15%. I feel like my show rate, you know, isn't that good. I feel like this and I feel like that. And when we actually sat down and looked at the metrics, what we found was something really interesting. At the time, we were actually spending around about $3,500 to acquire customers. And the average amount that those customers would spend on the day of purchase, aka day zero cash collected, was around about $10,000, $10,200 to be exact. And so when we looked at that number, we basically had this 2.5x, you know, to 3x return on what we would spend in marketing. And at the time, we were spending, I want to say, about $8,000 a month in our actual spend on the marketing itself. And I was sitting down and we were looking at all these different things and what we could do. And the guy who was running the mastermind just said to me, dude, this is not that complicated. You need to spend 5 to 10 times more on marketing to get more customers. And he was right. And there was efficiencies and things that we could improve to make that return stronger between this cost. But ultimately, if we would spend $50,000 a month on marketing versus spending $8,000 a month on marketing, we would have significantly more profit. You know, a really good example for this is when we were spending that $8,000 a month on our media. You know, let's say we were getting 3 customers and they were spending $30,000, right? That's what our outbound marketing was bringing. If we were to spend $50,000 instead, you know, we're going to get like 15 customers, right? And they're going to be spending, you know, a lot more money. That's going to be like 150K in terms of what those individuals are spending. Now, obviously, there's a bigger cost to that, but the difference between the 50K and the 150K compared to the difference between the 8K and the 30K was actually significant. Because if you look at these two numbers, This number over here was 22 grand in profit. This number here was 100 grand in profit. AKA, there was literally 5 times as much profit that we were making inside of the business just by spending more money. And so one of the things that's really important, and I want you to understand for this video, is that we want to figure out how you can do more marketing, how you can spend more money and more time. And knowing these metrics is going to give you the confidence, like it did for us, to actually go and spend more money, right? We had to have confidence in ourselves to be able to go and spend from $8,000 to $50,000 a month in marketing continually as we grow and spend more money on marketing. We need confidence behind this as well. So let's talk about the 2 different types of CAC. And inside of this video, we're going to be going in depth with this to help you guys really understand this. So the first type of paid acquisition is paid media. And we're going to talk about paid media CAC first, and that's the cost to acquire the customer, because this is the most common type of cost to acquire a customer that you're probably going to be familiar with. Now, the easiest example of this would be to talk about Facebook advertising. So let's say you spend $10K a month, right, on ads. And when you do that $10K a month, you're going to go out there and generate 100 calls. And from those 100 calls, let's say you get 10 customers. In this example, we're going to say it's a 10K product that we're actually selling. And so down here, it's going to cost us $100 a call, and it's going to cost us $1,000 to acquire a customer, right? That's what we're actually producing, as it seems. So those 10 customers are going to give us $1,000 cost to acquire. So when we look at just straight marketing CAC, right, paid media itself, our paid media CAC there is $1,000, right? It's costing us $1,000 because from those 100 live calls, 70 of them show up. We close 10 deals in that specific example. Now, important to understand here is that when you're looking at true marketing costs, there's more to factor in than just what the Facebook ads cost you. Let's just say your sales reps are getting paid 12.5% in this example. Well, for 10 customers, they're going to get that 12.5%. That means for one deal that's worth $10,000, there's going to be $1,250 of sales commission, right? Sales commission that they're actually being paid on top of that. So we always like to look at the true cost of what it's actually costing you to acquire customers. So in this example, what we would call the true PM CAC is going to be $2,250, right? That's what you would actually be paying after salespeople and after marketing to acquire a customer. And so that's the first thing we want to identify. Okay, how do we actually look at what's paid media and how much we're acquiring customers for? Now, the actually slightly harder equation here that most people don't really understand is how do you calculate earned media CAC? Let's say, for example, you're going out and you're doing podcast interviews or you're posting content on YouTube. How are you supposed to measure the cost of that? Because the reason that we want to measure the cost in the first place is to figure out how much more we can actually do in order to get new customers. And so this is how we've been able to actually measure our earned media cost to acquire a customer. And this is going to be really fundamental for you guys to actually look at and figure out, well, what is my time worth? When I'm doing marketing activities, what is it paying me back in terms of customers? And again, the thing that I want to remind you guys here is a lot of people consider that earned media is free. Oh, it didn't cost me anything to acquire these customers. Well, it cost you your time. And time, as we know, is a massively less scalable resource than money. So we have to be able to calculate what is your return on that investment of your time. So a really good example of this is let's just calculate. So let's say you did, 2 podcast interviews in a week, right? So you're spending 2 hours of your time. And when you get on those shows, if you're doing it the right way, like our Media Firestorm clients do by getting on high quality podcasts with a minimum, of 3,000 listeners that are going to be listening to that show, you can expect that you maybe, for those 3,000 people, get about 3% of the people who are going to, click on your thing or go to the link that you talk about in that episode. So in this example, your interviews, let's say they generated you 100 clicks to your page. And that page, typically you're going to have an opt-in and maybe a video sales letter that tries to book a call on the back end. So let's say 50% of those people actually gave you their email address. They're pretty high intent because they just listened to an hour worth of podcast episodes. And so we're going to get 50 people who are going to actually give us their email, opting in. And then from those 50 people that are opting in, get to that video sales letter page, we're going to have, let's say, 10% of those people that are going to book a call, right, on that next page. So from the 50, right, we're going to get 5 calls that are actually going to come in. So these are just baseline important metrics for us to understand. And often we will track separately close rate for earned media versus paid media. You'll often find the close rate is significantly higher on earned media just because somebody that's already listened and consumed a significant amount of content coming into that process versus like clicking a link on a page in that example. So you just want to multiply this out via a month to give you a bit of an easier number to figure out what your time investment is here. So if we multiply these numbers by, 4, that's going to give us the monthly number. We're looking at 8 hours worth of our time, right? Is actually going to give us 800 clicks. It's going to give us 400 opt-ins. And from there, we're going to have 10% of those. So that's going to give us 40 calls. Now, it's going to be really important here that you actually know your business metrics to be able to calculate the true cost, because you can calculate the cost of a call. So you're going to do 8 hours divided by the 40 calls, which would give you 0.2. So 0.2 of an hour is going to be 12 minutes. So it's taking you 12 minutes of your earned media time to generate one call. Now, similarly, we want to work out, well, what does it actually cost to acquire a customer from earned media? And so this is where we would look at those metrics. So if you've got 40 calls that are coming in, and let's say you've got a 70% show rate, well, a 70% show rate is going to give you 28 live calls. And of those 28 live calls, if you have a 25% close rate, which is a pretty reasonable close rate for earned media, you're going to be looking at 7 deals, right? And again, we can calculate this by deal, or we can also calculate this by value if you want to. So 8 hours divided by 7 deals is 1.14. It's 68.4 minutes. So we can see here that it's actually taking us 1 hour and 8 minutes for us to be able to acquire a customer. That's what our time is worth. This is really important for us to be able to actually articulate and understand, because we need to figure out, okay, how do we scale this? How many customers can I expect to get if I do more of this earned media? Or what are some of the other ways that I can leverage this? Now, there are a few more equations that I want to actually go through and help you guys understand in order for us to be able to actually calculate, okay, what do we need to change in this equation for us to be able to do more marketing? This is what it's costing us for our paid media to acquire a customer, and this is what it's costing us in terms of our earned media in terms of time. Now, the other thing that we need to understand in this equation is, okay, well, how much money are we actually collecting from these customers when we sell them? Because it's great in theory to say, I have a $10,000 product and therefore my customer is worth $10,000. But usually that's actually not the way it plays out. And what we actually want to understand is, well, how much money am I going to be collecting from my customers in day 0 or in the first 30 days? Because if you're going to go and acquire more customers and spend more money or more time, you actually need to be able to see that return in a short time frame. So let's see this example. If we've got a $10,000 product, and let's just say there's 3 ways in which you're going to take that money from a customer. You're going to either have a pay in full deal, and let's just say for the pay in full, you're giving it at $8,000. Or the other option is we've got 3 payments of $3,333, right? Around about $10,000 in terms of the cost. Well, in this example, if we've got 40% of our customers paying in full, then that means we've got $32K of cash. And then we've got the other 6 customers are doing a payment plan. That means we've got 6 times 3,333, which is around about $20,000, just shy of, in terms of monthly recurring revenue. Now, remember, you're then going to get a further 3 payments of that. So on day 30, you're going to have another 20K, and on day 60, you're going to have another 20K as well. And so the way that this breaks up is total cash collected. If we look at day 0, we're actually going to have 52,000. On day 30, we're going to have 72,000. And on day 60, we're going to have 92,000. Now, what's really important to understand about this is that means that your average cash collected is $5,200, not $10,000. It's half as much. So if you want to know the true numbers of what it's going to take for you to hit your goal, if we had taken 10,000 instead of 5,200, which is what we're actually collecting up front, we'd have got half as much volume as what we would have actually needed to succeed. So in this example, our cash that we're collecting on day 0 is $5,200. The cash that we're collecting in 30 days is $7,200. And then our true lifetime value is actually $9,200. So with us giving, a discount for pay in fulls, we actually don't have a $10,000 lifetime value. We have a $9,200 lifetime value. Now, what's really important for us to do here is then for us to calculate this cost with these equations. And so if we're looking at this, and above we talked about our true cost to acquire a customer was $2,250. What we now want to do is do the equation between these two numbers of how much cash we're collecting and what it actually costs to acquire a customer. So the first thing we want to calculate is what we call upfront cash to CAC. And so with our paid media, we have got $5,200 that we're collecting up front, and our cost to acquire a customer is $2,250. So the equation that we want to do to calculate our upfront cash to our paid media CAC is $5,200 divided by $2,250. And that's actually going to give us 2.31. So basically, every dollar that you spend, you're making $2.3 back. Now that's okay, but it's also challenging for us to be able to scale the media because it's quite likely that our cost to acquire customers is going to increase because as you spend more money with paid advertising, it typically gets less efficient. So we're going to do 5,200 divided by 1.14. That gives us 4,561. So an hour of my time is worth $4,500. And if I'm spending $2,250 in marketing, it's generating me $5,200. I've got a 2.31 return on my time. So these two numbers is helpful because we're saying, here's how much money I get when I spend my time, and here's how much money I get when I spend my dollars. Now, when you look at these two numbers, the first thing that you want to ask yourself is this number scalable? Is this worth me spending more time inside of this? And so first thing we want to look at there is, how can we get more for our time? So we're already spending 8 hours a month of our time, and that 8 hours is going to be bringing us around about $36,000 in return. And we're also spending $10K a month on ads, and that is netting us a return of that marketing by 2.31. So that 10K is bringing us 23.1K. So with the time and the money that we're spending on the marketing right now, we're actually bringing in around about 50K in return on what we're putting in. Now, the first thing you want to look at is this actually scalable, and what could we change in order to make this more efficient? Now, you could just spend more time and you could just spend more money, and this is still going to be profitable, but there's a very good chance with the numbers that we just put in here that there's going to be breakdown as you begin to scale and spend more money, because as you scale your earned media, you're going to have more team costs if you want to reach more people and make it more leveraged. And similarly, as you spend more money on your advertising, it's going to get less efficient as well. So what can you change in this math equation in order to get a better result? Some of the examples of things that you could do here is, one, you could actually charge more money. So rather than charging people 10K, right, you could increase the price of this product to, for example, double 20K, and you might see a slight drop in close rate from 25 to 20%, but that's going to give you significantly more average cash. Another thing you could do is you could actually change the way that you collect the money. And a really good example of this is if we look at the average numbers that we played out above here, right? We had 40% paying in full at $32,000, and we had 20 grand a month on these payment plans. Now, there's two ways in which you could change the way that you collect this money. Now, the first way you could collect more money is actually doing a compounding offer. So rather than charging up front and saying, okay, it's 10 grand for 6 months, you could say, well, we're going to charge people 3K a month, and we're going to aim to keep them for 6 months, but some customers may even stay longer. And this brings something called churn into account, which is, okay, as you guys know, how long are customers staying with us in this equation. I'll talk more about churn in a second, so you can actually figure out how to calculate, the real numbers of this. The second way that you could actually collect more money is actually by structuring the deals slightly differently. So for the same 10K a month, you could have your pay in full deals, which would be your 8K PIFs. But what you could also do is use a financing partner for the rest of the deal. So a lot of financing partners will allow you to have 85% of the deal value actually paid out to you up front. One of the partners that we use, Split It, will pay us 70% of the deal value up front, and then they'll pay us another 15% 6 months later. And so the way that that would work on a 10K deal is that we would actually collect 7K up front, and then we would get another $1,500 as a balloon payment 6 months later. But the client is actually going to be able to get a 0% interest-free deal where they could have, $830 a month completely interest-free if they wanted to. Now, that actually completely changes the structure of the way that you're collecting cash up front. In this example, we've now got every deal being 8K or 7K. And so if we have 4 deals and 6 deals in this equation, we're going to be looking at 42K of cash collected, as before is 32K. So this combined amount, $74,000, means that now our average customer is worth $7,400. So when we take the same equation before, and now we've got 7,400 divided by the 2,250 that it costs us to our customers, it's a much better equation. Now we're getting 3.28 return rather than before we were getting the 2.31. And so now this is just more scalable. For every dollar that goes in, we get 3 and a bit dollars that come out. So these are the examples of how we can increase this $1 million math. 1, we can charge more money, charging 20 grand instead of 10. 2, we can collect more money by using a finance partner. 3, we can actually do recurring compounding offers where if we can keep churn low and deliver on a great product, we can collect more money over time in terms of this equation. A couple other things that you can also do in this scenario is you can obviously reduce costs, and commission would probably be the main one. In this example, we calculated at a 12.5% commission. You could actually say, okay, I'm going to try and reduce that commission level to be able to give you a bit more of a competitive edge. And then the other way that you can do this is actually by having better back-end conversion systems. And so this is one of the ways that we like to use earned media, podcasts and content that we've created, is actually putting them in the back end of the conversion. So when people land on the confirmation page, including some of the podcast content inside of there, actually retargeting them with our Firehose ad strategy, actually sending a lot of that podcast content out to them before they get onto a sales call. Similarly, you can also use other strategies as well, like sending more emails and overall just improving that process. So before you actually go and spend more money, it's not a bad idea to say, well, is this actually going to work out for me? And to run those numbers and to do the math example. Now, once you've calculated what it's costing you in terms of time and what your return on that is and how much your return is on your money that you're spending, the next question is, well, how do I spend significantly more money and time in order to acquire more customers? And the challenge that I have for you here is that you want to be thinking in 5 to 10x numbers in terms of what you can spend to acquire more customers. Most of you who are listening to this video, to be really clear, are just not spending enough time or enough money or doing enough activities for you to get more customers. And now, so if you want to hit 100K a month or multiple 100K months, you just need to be doing significantly more volume of marketing. And so the question is, how do you 5 to 10x those efforts that you're putting into it? So the first thing, which is really obvious with your earned media, is you can just spend more money. If you get those numbers more efficient and that number looks good, right now in our business, we'll spend 3 grand to get a 10 grand customer. And those numbers are good enough for us for scale. We're happy to go spend more money acquiring more customers. And I would much rather have a lower margin for success, but have more volume so that at the end of the month, I'm still making more profit. If I spend 100 grand rather than spending 10 grand on that marketing, I'd much rather have that bigger profit number at the end of the month. And so obvious way number 1 is just to spend more money on marketing. And so you want to think of this like gambling, but you have better odds than what you've got inside of the casino. Now, one of my friends who's actually a men's coach, he's a therapist and he helps men who are going through divorce and challenges with their relationships. He actually just launched a new funnel just not that long ago, a new video sales letter. And over the weekend, we were talking about the results of it. And he was telling me, Jamie, this is great. I've spent $1,100 and I've actually been able to get 8 clients. And we sat down and we worked out what his numbers were, and he'd made about $8,000 of cash collected up front. Each of those clients he was selling on a $600 a month compounding offer, having that recurring revenue come in. And one of the things I said to him, I was like, one of the things that you got to think about here in this situation is how can you spend significantly more on marketing? And so what I told him was, when you get that $8,000 that hits your account next month, and you know that your customers are going to stick around because he has fantastically low churn rates, he's like, that's $8,000 of free advertising money. You should spend that $8,000 on marketing the next month. And he was shocked. He was taken aback. He's like, dude, all of the money that I made? And I'm like, yeah, because you spent $1,000 and made 8. If you spend 8, you're probably going to make 30. And then the next month you can spend the 30 acquiring even more. And so one of the things that you need to really understand here is that when your numbers make sense in the business, you need to go hard and play on the offensive. Because even if he goes out and he spends all of that $8,000 on advertising, even if it gets less efficient, even if he doesn't get new customers coming in, he's still going to get significantly more customers than he got the previous month when he was spending $1,000. So he's going to be fine in terms of the business. So the first thing you got to do is got to nut up and actually go out there and spend a little bit more money on advertising. And the more money you can spend, the more customers you're actually going to acquire, even if it gets less efficient. Now, the second thing that we want to think about here is, one, how do we spend more of our time on earned media, but also how do we get more leverage out of our time? Because in the example we shared above, this person was already spending, 2 hours a week on podcast content. And so the first thing that I want you guys to understand is that if you are committed to growing your company, you can actually put in a lot more work than you realize. Right now, I'm recording this video. This is a form of earned media, and this earned media is taking me probably an hour to record. And right now in my business, I'm actually doing a YouTube video recording daily. And so I'm doing 5 of these episodes a day in terms of my recording schedule. On top of that, I'm also doing 2 interviews a week on other people's podcasts. So that's another 2 hours of my time. I'm also recording a solo interview, and let's just say, it might be 30 minutes, but let's just call it an hour of my time. And on top of that, I'm also doing, we call a hot seat show. So I'm doing another hot seat show that's also an hour of my time. And so right now I'm spending in my week 9 hours of my time putting out earned media and attention. Now, the thing that's really important to understand about earned media is that it's different to paid media. When you spend more money on paid media, it gets less efficient over time, which means if you spend $10,000 and you're getting a 3x return on your money, if you go and spend $100,000, it's very likely that you're going to get less than a 3x return because costs get more expensive, it gets less efficient. This is a well-known thing when it comes to paid advertising, is that it gets worse the more money you spend. Counteractively, earned media attention gets more efficient the more of it that you do. And so let me give you an example. Look at Alex Hormozi today when he's been putting out all of this content. Do you think that his old content that he put out 5 years ago is getting more throughput or less throughput because of the time and attention and energy he put into the brand? Absolutely more, right? That same piece of content, that same 1 hour of time is now going to be worth more leads, more calls, and more customers. And his time to acquire customers, the cost of his earned media is going to be decreasing. He's going to get more dollar value for that time that he put in to the earned media. And this is why we say to clients all the time inside of Media Firestorm, you want to consistently be doing at least 2 podcast interviews every single week, because the more time and energy and effort you put into this, the more it compounds. And so your 2 interviews that you're doing every week now, a year from now, those 2 interviews that you're doing on interview 101 and 102, it's going to be worth more for you in terms of your return on that time that you're spending, especially if you're compounding it. So step number 1, just spend more time recording the content. There isn't a lot else you can do in your business that's worth more money for your time than this. Now, the thing to remember about your earned media is there's something that we call the shadow funnel, which is when you put out earned media, when you do podcast episodes, you put out YouTube content, you repurpose it into blogs, or you put it anywhere else. That's actually going to create a back-end effect for your business, because when people come through your paid media or when people Google you and look to find you, if there is more content available, more media available, they're going to be going and researching and consuming and doing their due diligence on you. And so there's a back-end benefit and back-end effect the more consistent you get with the media that you're putting out there. So step number 1, how do you get more for your time? Do more. Put yourself out and put out more content. And it's really interesting that these 9 hours that I'm doing every week is like the extreme end. I'm going very heavy into content right now. One of my friends, he only does 2 hours a week of the media. And what he's done instead is he's used money to get more leverage on those 2 hours of time that he puts in. And so I'll give you a really good example. You can actually get more leverage by developing a team. So for example, with all of this content that I'm recording, here's a really great way that we can get more leverage from it. So that hotline show, which is a 1 hour show where I'm going to be speaking to 8 different individuals for probably 10 minutes at a time, we can turn that hotline show into 8-minute clips, and we can put that out onto YouTube, right? The second thing I can do is those 5 YouTube videos that I'm doing every week, I can also put those out as podcast content, right? And so now I've got 5 extra pieces of podcast content. Similarly, the 2 interviews and the 1 solo podcast that I'm doing, those 3 podcast recordings I'm doing every week, that can also be put out onto my YouTube channel, right? And we've got 3 extra YouTube videos that are going out. Now, on top of that, those 2 interviews I've done on other people's shows, we might be able to turn those 2 interviews every week into 15 8-minute highlighted clips. Bear in mind here, I'm not talking about short form content. In my opinion, short form content is significantly less influential than long form content. So we're still just breaking these up into, 8-minute clips at a time. But that would give us, from those podcast episodes, it's actually going to give us 15 of those 8-minute clips, right? And so this is just us taking the content and putting it into, pretty easy and pretty easily managed and editable pieces of content, right? And so that alone takes our 9 hours of content and the 9 media pieces that we were having, and it turns it into 40 media pieces. And so what would it cost us for us to have a team to be able to develop that? Well, maybe if we had an in-house editor and person that was doing this full time, right? Let's just say we pay them $5,000 a month in this example. Well, that $5,000 a month is able to give us 40 pieces of media compared to 9. And so this is a really great way we can create more leverage. Now, that's just with video and podcast. On top of this, you can also turn extra content into a blog post. You can do it into LinkedIn posts. You can do it into Twitter posts. The timeline goes on, but I wouldn't recommend that you go and try and create this content. I would do pillar content, podcast episodes, YouTube, and then pay a team member to go and distribute it into these other mediums. So just to wrap this episode up, I hope this was valuable for you guys. What I want you to understand is that in order for you to be able to grow the business, in order for you to be able to get to where you want to go in sort of your goals, 1, you need to know your numbers. The reason that we talk about $1 million month math and metrics is that you actually need to understand, what am I achieving right now? What is my return on my time and my money? And is this acceptable to scale? And if it isn't currently acceptable, if you're not making enough money, or if you're not getting enough bang for your buck from your time, you might want to change some elements of the way that you structure the offer, pricing, how you take money from customers, or even improving some of those back-end selling systems like we do inside of Media Firestorm. If you're listening and you're curious and you want to know, well, Jamie, how do you help these 7-figure businesses to do and implement more of these systems? Click down in the description down below. You can learn more about Media Firestorm. We've kept people plugging into our top 1% podcast network, getting on 1 or 2 shows every week. And we help them build out these back-end systems and actually the front-end traffic systems to get more results from the earned media they're putting out there. You can find out more about that. We do twice a week videos and live Q&As. We've got an awesome community full of other rich people like you, probably trying to get a lot richer. And on top of that, you're going to get access to me to help you guys actually implement some of these changes. If you take nothing else away from this video other than this, just understand that if you do the math and understand where you are today, what it's costing you in dollars and what it's costing you in time to get your current customers, you can actually calculate what would be required for you to be able to reach your goals. And for most people coming in, the real truth of this is that you probably just need to spend 5 to 10 times more time or money on your marketing efforts in order to help you grow to the next level in your business. So if you like this video, if this was useful, just give us a like on the video. I hope you guys are getting a lot out of these. I'm going to be doing tons more content. This is super fun for me to be able to help you guys with this. And yeah, if you enjoy it, hit subscribe and we'll hit you up when we have the next videos coming on. Hit that notification bell. We'll see you in the next video.